The French Revolution was a period of radical political and societal change in France that began with the Estates General of 1789 and ended with the formation of the French consulate in November 1799. Many of its ideas are considered fundamental principles of liberal democracy, while the values and institutions it created remain central to French political discourse. Its causes are generally agreed to be a combination of social, political, and economic factors, which the old order proved unable to manage. Although willing to consider reforms, Louis XVI often backed down when faced with opposition from conservative elements within the nobility. The court became the target for popular anger, particularly Queen Marie Antoinette, who was viewed as a spendthrift Austrian spy and blamed for the dismissal of progressive ministers like Jacques Necker. In May 1789, widespread social distress led to the convocation of the Estates General, which was converted into a national assembly. The storming of the Bastille occurred in Paris on the 14th of July 1789, when revolutionary insurgents attempted to storm and seize control of the medieval armory, fortress, and political prison. After considerable fighting, the governor of the fortress allowed the insurgents to enter the Bastille. Contrary to what had been agreed, the insurgents killed the governor. The Bastille then represented royal authority in the center of Paris. The prison contained only 7 inmates at the time of its storming and was already scheduled for demolition, but was seen by the revolutionaries as a symbol of the monarchy's abuse of power. Its fall was the flashpoint of the French Revolution. The next 3 years were dominated by the struggle for political control, exacerbated by economic depression and civil disorder. Austria, Britain, Prussia, and other external powers sought to restore the old order by force, while many French politicians saw war as the best way to unite the nation and preserve the revolution by exporting it to other countries. These factors resulted in the outbreak of the French Revolutionary Wars in April 1792, abolition of the French monarchy, and proclamation of the French First Republic. King Louis was publicly executed on the 21st of January 1793. At his trial 4 days prior, the National Convention had convicted the former king of high treason in a near-unanimous vote. While no one voted not guilty, several deputies abstained. Ultimately, they condemned him to death by a simple majority. Often viewed as a turning point in both French and European history, this regicide inspired various reactions around the world. To some, Louis's death at the hands of his former subjects symbolized the end of an unbroken 1,000-year period of monarchy in France and the true beginning of democracy within the nation. Others, even some who had supported major political reform, condemned the execution as an act of senseless bloodshed and saw it as a sign that France had devolved into a state of violent and immoral chaos. Louis's death emboldened revolutionaries throughout the country, who continued to alter French political and social structure radically over the next several years. 9 months after Louis's death, his wife Marie Antoinette, formerly Queen of France, met her own death at the guillotine at the same location in Paris. Marat was a Swiss-born French political theorist and physician. A journalist and politician during the French Revolution, he was a vigorous defender of the lower classes, a radical voice, and published his views in pamphlets, placards, and newspapers. His journalism was known for its fierce tone and uncompromising stance toward the new leaders and institutions of the revolution. Responsibility for the September massacres has been attributed to him, given his position of renown at the time, and a paper trail of decisions leading up to the massacres. Marat was assassinated by Charlotte Corday while taking a medicinal bath for his debilitating skin condition. In death, Marat became an icon to the Jacobins as well as the greater working class population and a revolutionary martyr. The most famous painter in Paris, Jacques-Louis David, immortalized Marat in his iconic painting The Death of Marat. Maximilien Robespierre was a French lawyer and statesman who became one of the most widely known, influential, and controversial figures of the French Revolution. As a member of the Estates General and the Constituent Assembly, he campaigned for the right to vote of all men. Robespierre played an important part in the agitation which brought about the fall of the French monarchy on the 10th of August 1792 and the convocation of the National Convention. His goal was to create a one and indivisible France, establish equality before the law, abolish prerogatives, and defend the principles of direct democracy. Robespierre was elected as a deputy to the French Convention in early September 1792 but was soon criticized for trying to establish either a triumvirate or a dictatorship. In April 1793, Robespierre urged the Jacobins to raise an army to enforce revolutionary laws and sweep away any counter-revolutionary conspirator, leading to the armed insurrection of June 1793. Although Robespierre always had like-minded allies, the politically motivated violence that his faction often promoted disillusioned others. Both members of the convention and the French public eventually turned against him. In the middle of the night, he and his allies were arrested in the Paris town hall. Robespierre was wounded in his jaw, but it is not known if it was self-inflicted or the outcome of the skirmish. About 90 people, including Robespierre, were executed in the days after, events that initiated a period known as the Thermidorian reaction. Following the Paris-based insurrection, the Constitution was suspended and effective political power passed from the National Convention to the more radical Committee of Public Safety. An estimated 16,000 counter-revolutionaries were executed during the subsequent Reign of Terror, which ended with the so-called Thermidorian reaction in July 1794. Weakened by a combination of external threats and internal opposition, in November 1795 the Republic was replaced by the Directory. 4 years later, in November 1799, the consulate seized power in a military coup led by Napoleon Bonaparte. This is generally seen as marking the end of the revolutionary period.